Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
Lovely.
Thanks for joining us. We're live podcasting from the Alchemist kitchen on East 1st Street in Bowery in New York City on Ferragosto, the middle of August 15th. This is Matthew Hendershot.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for coming
Junella
out.
Chin.
Thank you. Hello.
So, Joe, it occurs to me that a lot of people might not know about the show, might not know why they're here other than they got an email or a ping or a Facebook invite. Why don't you go into a little bit of the background about Brave New Weed? Tell these people who you are. Tell them how we came to do the show and why we continue to do the show.
Setting me up for shameless self-promotion.
Of course.
About a year ago, I spent 4 years writing this book called Brave New Weed, where I traveled around the world trying to figure out what this plant was, what it really was, the difference between the myth and the fact. And it came out last year, and I've been talking about it ever since. And I did a talk at Google where I met Matthew and Alan, our other co-producer, and they said, let's do a podcast on this topic because the world of weed is maybe the most and maybe the only good thing that's happening in America right now. I mean, and God knows we need more of it
not.
every day from what's going on, okay?
Let's hope there's more good out there than just us.
We hope so too, really. But right now it feels like one of the positive forces in the world. And it seems to be helping an awful lot of people. And the more I've learned about it, the more amazed and intrigued and fascinated by the plant I've become. Have you had the same experience?
Yes, I've been in the cannabis industry for a long time, for over 10 years. I actually began medical school in San Francisco, and so I had the best of both worlds. I was being trained as a conventional doctor, but at the same time, I had a lot of mentors that were teaching me about medicine, cannabis as a medicine.
Botanical medicines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the world of botanical medicines is really interesting. We'll talk more about that. So anyway, let's do some news. And then we'll talk to June about CBD, the highless marijuana.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Let's get into the news. So first up on our news, we got to throw a little bit of shame at the Department of Justice. One of our favorite targets
For a
to throw
change.
shame.
Just for a change, because they've been doing such good work on the American landscape.
This is an article from, it's in the Cannabis, and this comes out of a statement from the DEA, oddly enough, saying that starting a year ago, the DEA began accepting applications to grow more marijuana for research at the federal level, and as of this month, has 25 proposals to consider for grow sites around the country. However, all of these proposals are currently sitting on desks at the Justice Department waiting to be signed off on.
Because Jeff Sessions really wants to read them, right?
Apparently so.
This is one of his favorite topics.
But the statement coming out of the DEA is that they are just sitting on it and nothing will happen until they act upon these things. So this is a federal government agency working alongside growers to try and make some progress happen, and they're just being stonewalled by the DOJ.
What else is new?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to come to this sort of tactics. You know, I thought there were more ways that we could go.
I don't think
about
Jeff Sessions is feeling like he has a lot of leeway these days. I think he feels pretty squeezed. I think he thought pot was going to be something he could do easily and quickly, and it's turning out not to be the case.
We talked a lot about that, and the idea that it would be easy does seem like a lot of the fear that came along with his appointment in the beginning of the year in the Trump administration came with that. This sort of like, oh man, he's going to crack down on pot. He's going to crack down on pot. And it really hasn't happened, and B, it seems that the road ahead of him to actually do that is very, very daunting at this point.
He's got voters in 29 states who voted for legalization. It's not easy to fight with that.
So it'd be curious to see if, when this settles, obviously the Commission on Violent Crime is still out. Those reports are sort of trickling in. The first stage of which was actually that they think that everything's fine. And that they don't need to change the policy, and everything is going well in the medical marijuana world. So I don't know if he's going to buy into that, if he's going to do his own like Nixonian thing and turn a corner anyway.
Let's see if he's even heading the department in a year. We can all hope.
Or at the beginning of next
We can
week,
only
maybe.
hope, okay? Tell us something more positive, Matthew.
Sure. How about this? How about NBA Commissioner Adam Silver saying, to the extent that science demonstrates that there are effective uses for medical reasons, we would be open to allowing players to use medical marijuana for pain management in the NBA.
Should anybody tell him that 90% of the players are already using it?
One would think that he has to be aware. This is
think he knows
also
this.
really interesting.
It
because
is.
It's hot on the heels of the NFL signaling that they're willing to work with the NFL Players Association to allow cannabis to treat pain in the NFL. As you know from our conversation with Marvin Washington, this has been a big issue for the NFL, and they want to get access to CBD, access to THC, access to medical cannabis, and it's the same kind of thing, right? We all know that when they're not on the field, or maybe even when they are on the field, they're probably using cannabis
I think it
anyway.
hurts to be off the field when you're working in the NBA. It really
One would
does
think.
hurt.
How about a funny news story, Joe?
About the town?
Yeah, how about it?
Tell us about the town.
So, a company
this.
called American Green, which is a marijuana-focused technology company and consultancy, has purchased an entire town named Nipton, California, for about $5 million. Which, by the way, if I had known that you could buy an entire town
For $5 million, it's cheaper than buying an apartment in New York, right?
I'm pretty sure I've spent that much on New York rent. But their plan is to create, out of Nipton, California, population currently 6 people living there, a sort of ganja tourist paradise where visitors might someday tour a marijuana farm, shop in dispensaries, take a dip in natural springs and baths, and enjoy outdoor tokes in pot-friendly bed and breakfasts.
Yeah, I could think of worse places to go. I mean, it sounds okay.
It does. Do you think that pot tourism in the United States will catch
Absolutely.
on and become
Oh,
a
yeah,
thing?
absolutely. I think even on the West Coast now it's happening. You can go to the most beautiful places in California, right?
Absolutely.
Where have you been? Have you been to the north?
You can go up to the Bay Area through Humboldt County. They have little bed and breakfast. They have yoga. You can do yoga with cannabis. You can
Yeah,
work
these-
out with a trainer with cannabis. I mean, it's infused everywhere.
Interesting that you bring up yoga and cannabis.
Our next podcast after this is an interview with the woman who started Ganja Yoga, Dee DeSalt. Have you ever done Ganja Yoga?
No, I have not.
Oh, wow. It's actually a really great thing. I did it a couple of weeks ago in California. Anybody here ever done Ganja Yoga? I can highly recommend it. It's very relaxing. And
You can highly recommend it.
I can highly recommend it.
Hey,
We'll tell you more about that in a couple of weeks.
absolutely.
What else?
What else? Let's see. The last thing I've got actually is very apropos.
What is
So the FDA is currently submitting user testimonials for CBD for a research project after they have made a public declaration that the molecule has been known to be beneficial. So this is in conjunction with the World Health Organization and studying the scheduling of 14 different chemicals and drugs right now. But basically, FDA Deputy Commissioner Anna Abram sent out a notice that says that acknowledged that CBD has been shown to be beneficial in experimental models for several neurological disorders, including those of seizure and epilepsy,
And pain and insomnia and what else?
and all sorts of other fun stuff, right?
Arthritis, anxiety, Tourette's, ADD, the list goes on and on.
Okay, that's a great segue.
Well,
Thank you for
the
that.
cool thing about this, before we segue, is that there is on regulations.gov a form that you can go and submit your own personal testimonial
About CBD.
of how you've interacted with CBD. And the FDA is currently soliciting these stories. They want to know more about how people are using CBD, what they're using CBD for, and the efficacy.
What's the address again?
So if you go to regulations.gov and search for International Drug Scheduling Convention on Psychotropic Substances, and
That's
I know
easy.
That's, a
That's
lot.
easy.
It's probably not too hard to find if you're on regulations.gov. I'm sure a lot of that stuff is about like how to pave highways and stuff. But go dig around on there. We'll post it on our Facebook and we'll blast it out on Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff. So we'll make sure that you get the link. But you can go and share your CBD stories with the FDA, and hopefully we can all work together to advance this through the government.
Great.
That'd be great.
Fantastic. Now do we segue?
Now we can segue.
Great. Good. Now? Okay, good. So I'm here with Junella Chin, who I met about a year ago, who I think is, well, I'm very admiring of you and your work and what you do. And I'm hoping you'll just tell these folks how you got into cannabis medicine, even as a little girl? How did you get into this sort of growing up?
Sure. So as far as I can remember growing up, I've always had back pain and stiff joints, even as a little kid. And when you think of a child, you think of a flexible little kid cartwheeling across the living room floor. Well, I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune arthritic disease, progressive arthritis, usually diagnosed in young adults. And it basically makes your spine and your pelvis feel like a cement cinder block. And what happens to your vertebrae as it progresses is it starts fusing together. So your spine actually becomes crazy glued together, as well as your sacrum. So it looks like a bamboo stick.
Does that hurt a lot?
That's an understatement.
Okay.
So I tried dozens of medications, conventional medications, anti-inflammatories, steroids, nerve block injections, opiates, everything under the sun, but nothing was long lasting.
And from what age?
Oh, the pain started at 14,
Wow.
easily,
Okay.
14 or 15. So I went to San Francisco for medical school, and I was disheartened because I was training to be a conventional doctor. I had dozens of physicians at my disposal, but no one could really help me. It was like a revolving door. Here's medication, but it has side effects, but this makes me drowsy. I couldn't even retain any of the academic material that I was learning in med school. I couldn't stay awake. I was barely passing. So I met Dr. Allen, who was an integrative physician treating HIV and AIDS patients in San Francisco with marijuana. And
What year are we here?
This was the late 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was treating patients with marijuana for appetite and pain. And he said to me, Junella, I have this marijuana plant. And it won't really make you high, but it'll make you feel like you did yoga. You'll feel a whole lot better. And I was mortified. I grew up in the Bronx, where the social stigma of marijuana was huge. And I was a goody-goody. I was pre-med, I went to an Ivy League school, and marijuana was either you're a drug dealer, you're a high school dropout, right? Or you're a gangster, right? So I reluctantly tried, because it was either that or drop out of school. He gave me this little brown bottle. I remember it smelled like alcohol, wet grass, and wet dog.
Yeah.
And it tasted awful.
Was it a tincture?
It was a tincture.
Okay.
It was awful. But after a few weeks of using it, I could actually be pain-free. I could sit in class. I could be in the hospital. I could study. And it changed the trajectory of my life. I would not have become a physician if it wasn't
You don't
for
think you would have
marijuana.
graduated
I
from
wouldn't
medical
have.
school?
I wouldn't have.
Isn't that interesting? So describe the effect. Well, first of all, what is CBD? Cannabidiol.
So CBD is a part of the marijuana plant that is non-psychoactive, but it also has benefits of anti-muscle spasm, anti-pain, anti-inflammatory. It's also anti-tumor, anti-epileptic. So it has a lot of benefits without the high.
And the reason it has all these different effects is because we have receptors all through our bodies that was only discovered about 30 years ago, this receptor system that this particular molecule interacts with. And it has all of these interesting interactions, correct?
The largest human receptor system in the body.
In the body, yeah.
The
Yeah.
largest.
Yeah. And it affects almost every organ in the body, right? I've heard that it affects 105 illnesses, which no other plant even comes close to.
And I was skeptical because they're unrelated illnesses. You think of Alzheimer's dementia, you think of traumatic brain injury, and then you're looking at Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, and then you're looking at gout. I thought, how can that be?
Yeah.
It's one plant.
It is confusing. It is confusing. So do you continue taking it?
I continue taking it, but what it helped me do was just break open the storm so I could integrate other things to help alleviate the pain. It just broke the cycle of the pain.
So you touched on something there, saying that it seems that all these illnesses are unrelated. What is the relationship then that allows CBD to act in so many different ways?
That's a great question. It's inflammation. It's chronic, low-lying inflammation. And that's the seed of these chronic diseases, like diabetes, arthritis, ADD, anxiety, stress. That's where it all stems from, inflammation.
Huh.
Really interesting. So how do you work with CBD today?
So I'll have patients either take a low dose of CBD as an anti-inflammatory.
What's a low dose?
A low dose, about 25 milligrams spread throughout the day. For more chronic illnesses, such as epilepsy or Crohn's disease, you can take up to 200 milligrams a day. So it really depends on your body. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's really finding your optimal therapeutic dosage. with
Yeah, talk
CBD.
about that. Talk about botanical medicines and how they're different from take 2 pills and call me in the morning.
Well, it's never that simple, and we live in a culture where we think, we want a simplistic answer to a very complex question. Diet is not the same for two people with Crohn's disease. One might flourish with dairy, and one might run to the bathroom every time they have dairy products. And the same thing with CBD. I have, for example, 2 patients with ulcerative colitis. One takes about 5 milligrams of CBD. Any more than that, it actually aggravates his symptoms, and he has increased diarrhea. The other gentleman, then they're the same age, they're both in their 30s. The other gentleman needs 150 milligrams spread throughout the day. Not all at once, but spread throughout the day. That decreases the inflammation, and he doesn't have to run to the bathroom. He doesn't have those searing cramps throughout the day.
So that's hard for doctors. Doctors aren't really good at dealing with medicines that vary so widely in different patients, are they?
No, because that's not how we're taught. So when you go to conventional medical school, you're taught one molecular model. This is the dosage, and this is how you titrate. This is step A through Z. And with plant medicine, there's a dance. You have to really get to know the patient. You have to really adjust to the patient's needs. So there's a lot more time you have to spend in the office with the patient.
So you trained in California, right? And you saw patients in California for many years, right?
Yeah, as being in California, I was lucky. I had this switch box in front of me, and I had conventional medicine training, and at the same time, I was able to meet with different mentors and different healthcare practitioners to teach me about cannabis, and I was able to marry the two and have an integrative practice.
So what did your colleagues think about this? I mean, was there stigma? Was there any stigma about being a cannabis physician, either from patients or from medical colleagues?
Yes, there's always been a stigma.
There is.
And even to today, there's a stigma.
Even in California?
California less so. I mean, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
They legalized it in 96, so they've had some time to get over it. But there still is, a lot of physicians will mention it, but they don't really support it outright.
How do you work to convince other doctors that this might be a good thing, or do you not bother anymore?
No, I do. I started teaching CME classes, continuing medical education, to both nurse practitioners, to doctors, to even healthcare practitioners, going through the science of it, going through the pharmacokinetics, the physiology of it, and that makes it, when it's presented in that way, I think physicians are more open to it.
In their language?
In their language.
Yeah. And has there been a lot of science on it, on CBD?
There's over 20,000 medical citations globally. Yes.
Is that a lot?
So when you hear other doctors or other people say, there's just not enough studies, that's untrue.
Yeah. We've actually posted all that stuff as well in the past. You can go online, you can find all this documentation. That's government searchable websites and publications that have collected medical documents of all these studies. And there is just so much information out there, but there's also a huge propaganda campaign against that information.
But here's the madness. This is a chemical or compound that heals people and has no demonstrated side effect ever. Am I correct?
Never. You can't overdose on it.
You can't overdose on it.
History of recorded time, no overdose.
No overdose. Not even even if you take too much, nothing. You don't even go to sleep.
The lethal dose is smoking 1,500 pounds in 15 minutes.
Right. That's a pot. 1,500 pounds in 15 minutes. That's a calculation.
Who figured that out and how?
That's exactly right. That's the legal dose.
So it's very, very safe. I mean, the youngest person I have is a 10-month-old infant with epilepsy, and he's
10 months old.
10 months old, seizing about 100 times a day.
Oh my God. So wait, let's talk about that. I mean, here you are, you're a doctor, you're practicing in New York, which is not exactly the great frontier of cannabis medicine, of cannabis anything really. Is it dangerous for you to be practicing cannabis medicine that's federally illegal in a state like New York? Do you feel danger, or do you feel
not because there's 29 states that have legalized it, so I feel relatively safe. I haven't met any issues. Practicing in California for over 10 years, I think the transition to New York, where I am now, is not a problem.
Why would you move from California where you're practicing and you're flourishing, to come to a state like New York, which has a terrible medical marijuana program with about, what, 22,000 people in it now?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah,
we were talking about this
it's
before.
like a sad little piddle of a program in a massive state with a tremendous possibility.
Well, it's because it's in its infancy stage, and I think we can really help build things.
Do you think so?
Yes, I'm optimistic.
She was telling
You
me.
are optimistic.
I am.
Hey, you always
I'm
call
not
me
opti-
optimistic.
Yeah, I know, but
Maybe
I'm
starting
not.
to think you're a little pessimistic.
I'm
Joe.
definitely a pessimist.
No, we were talking about the New York State medical program, and I wasn't aware of this, but you said that you think it's some upwards of 1,000 doctors
Yeah,
now
there's
who are
about 1,000
licensed.
doctors now, and since chronic pain was added, which is significant, applications for the medical marijuana program went up 70%
All because of chronic pain.
because of chronic pain.
Well,
Wow.
people over 35 pretty much understand chronic pain, right?
We're all going to meet chronic illness at some point in our lives, chronic pain, whether we like it or not. And it's terrifying, but we're going to lose control. Our cognition's going to decline. We're all going to be at that position. And CBD, I think, is more of an empowering medicine for us because it gives us real autonomy. We can control the inflammation preventatively and during a flare-up.
That's
So-
interesting. It gives you autonomy.
It gives you
It gives you
real
control,
autonomy.
is what you're. Yeah.
It
yeah,
gives you control.
Yeah.
So arthritis is linked to inflammation. That seems obvious. You've also mentioned Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's is linked to inflammation.
What else?
Alzheimer's and dementia.
Ulcerative colitis.
Ulcerative colitis,
Crohn's,
seizures,
Seizures.
Parkinson's disease, that's a big one because it's muscle spasm, constipation. Your whole GI system shuts down with the pharmaceutical medications for Parkinson's.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
So CBD helps much more than THC for Parkinson's.
How
Across the board.
Out of curiosity, how much do you see with CBD efficacy in the way of like we know CBD is treating this problem, and how much of that compared to you're taking some sort of opioid or some sort of narcotic to treat pain and getting away, and that the side effects of that causing all these problems. So like you mentioned constipation, the prescription medication leading to constipation, leading to other health problems. Is there a way to say, to understand how different like CBD is affecting that problem, or is affecting that as a symptom of the original
That's a
medication?
long question,
I know,
Matthew.
Sorry.
So when you're a physician and you prescribe opiates, you normally follow in and say, okay, well, here's some Colace and stool softener because you're going to get constipated.
Right.
Yeah. So instead of doing that and you say, here's CBD, you're not going to have a constipation problem, but your pain will decrease.
All right. It's
It
more
simplifies it.
preventative. Okay.
Moving away from that topic. So, what about the mix of THC and CBD? So, THC, for those of you who don't know, is the psychoactive part of cannabis, why people smoke it to get high or use it to get high. There are different compounds in the same plant, obviously, and when they come together, they potentiate each other. Is that correct?
Yes, and you actually illustrated really wonderful in your book when you compared THC to CBD as a married couple. You
As an
said
old
they're
married couple.
antagonistic but synergistic.
They
So-
fight a lot, but they get along better when they're together.
Exactly. So CBD counteracts the psychoactive effects of THC.
So it does.
So it does.
It balances it out. And in the old days, before we had the drug wars, the plant had more of an equal balance of CBD and THC. Those of us who were old enough to remember smoking pot in the 60s or 70s know that it was a much milder, much sort of easier thing. Like you didn't really think about it so much. And that's because of CBD was in it, correct?
Right. And because of prohibition, the CBD was bred out of it.
Because they thought it was, that nobody knew what it was.
And the dispensaries didn't want to stock it because the recreational users prized the THC. They wanted the euphoria, they wanted the sedation. So it ramped up the THC strains and it decreased the CBD dominant strains.
So are there CBD dominant strains available easily?
Well, Charlotte's Web would be an example of that.
That's a
right?
hemp
That's
strain.
hemp.
That's
That's hemp, yeah.
comes from hemp. I'm talking about pot.
So what would,
cannabis.
explain to me then the scientific difference between hemp and cannabis? Because apparently
You do that
I'm
one.
going to miss that because I thought cannabis.
So
encompassed all
broadly
of
speaking, there's two types of cannabis plants. There's the hemp plant, which is low resin, and then there's high resin medicinal plant with THC and CBD. So the hemp plant doesn't have any THC in it. And hemp is used as planted for fiber, rope, canvas, seed oil, okay? But the thing about hemp is it's also what's called a bioaccumulator. So what does that mean? A lot of environmentalists will use hemp as a phytoextractor to clean up environmental spills, pollutants, and it's like a natural vacuum cleaner.
They
You can think
planted it
of that
around
way.
Chernobyl after the nuclear meltdown there.
Yeah, and in
pick it out of the
Italy,
soil.
actually, there was an old steel mill, the largest of Europe. They wanted to redevelop the land to commercial and residential use, so they planted hemp all around to suck up the heavy metals from the steel mill. So when you purchase hemp oil, I know the Stanley brothers have exceptional hemp oil, but when you purchase hemp oil from other no-name brands or that are not third-party tested, you have to be careful. Make sure there's no solvents, there's no pesticide. How was it extracted? So these are the questions that you have to ask when you're purchasing hemp oil CBD, which is different from the marijuana
From
plant.
marijuana, right. So a lot of hemp oil it comes from China
In Romania.
and Romania, and these are countries that have no environmental regulations at all. So what you're taking can be actually sort of nasty or possibly even toxic. So, and the problem is because the FDA doesn't regulate any of these substances, there's no labeling on them. So unless the company decides to put the label on and says, here's where it comes from, here's how it's made, blah, 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 you're not going to know. So I think you got to be really careful of that
Right.
stuff, don't
and
you?
if you have cancer or if you have an autoimmune disease, you're already immunosuppressed. So you can't have any heavy metal, any fungus, aspergillus, anything like that in there.
So it's very tricky.
Very
It's
tricky.
very tricky right now. There's a couple of good companies like the Stanley Brothers, CW Hemp, and there's another one in Vermont called Green Mountain CBD, which we know are growing organically, growing their own in America, and are growing safe medicines. I think there's other companies as well whose names I'm not familiar with, but we'll figure it out pretty soon. Yes, Care Garden CBD. There's another one. Okay.
So with this stuff in mind, let's say I think I might be a candidate for the New York medical program. I've been struggling with whatever it might be. How would one go about beginning the process to become a patient in the state of New York?
So you would see a certified physician that's in the medical marijuana program through the Department of Health. And so the doctors have to register through the program. They take a little course. I think it's about a 4-hour online course. And then you have to track down that physician. The list is public now on the Department of Health. And you meet with the physician, you document medical records, you establish a relationship with the physician, and then they'll register you for the program. Albany, through the Department of Health, will send you an ID card, a photo ID card, which is the same photo that you'll see on your DMV license because it's linked. And then you're able to go to any of the dispensaries in New York State.
Are your patients any particular age, any particular group of people, or do they range from young to all the way old?
I treat a whole gamut. I treat children, infants, all the way up to my oldest patient's 99.
Really?
Yes.
What do you treat him or her for?
She has pancreatic cancer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a story or two about how it's worked with certain people or with different conditions?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could talk about a concussion injury. Andrew came into my office. He's 17. He came in with his folks. And I remember when he came in, he had this scarf around his head and his face because the wind blowing through his hair made it feel like he had nails going through his brain.
God.
And he had post-concussion syndrome. He was an ice hockey player. And normally, he got injured in the game. The coach or his doctor would say, rest a few days and you'll be fine. You'll be back in it, no problem. But this time it was different. He had multiple injuries over the last course of the year, and he couldn't stand fluorescent lighting, natural lighting. He just stayed in his room the whole time because he had migraines. He had depression. He had suicidal thoughts. He had, aggression. He was going through everything, and they gave him Valium and antidepressants and steroids. They gave him must have been like 24 medications.
Oh, God.
And he was in his senior year of high school. So what did he do? He went on the web and he said, I'm going to figure this stuff out myself. And he was able to source some marijuana, a high CBD marijuana, I think a harlequin or a catatonic. And he said the first puff, his brain stopped feeling like it was going to explode.
The first puff.
The first puff. He bought a little vaporizer. He started using it on his own. And so his parents got worried. He was going.
Of course.
So his parents said, well, we're going to get you at least some guidance from a medical marijuana doctor. So number one, you're legal. And number two, we can just watch, how you do. And you're not just on your own trying to source marijuana. The issue we ran into him was he goes to a public school. and he needed the cannabis throughout the day. And so the school said, no, you can't bring that on campus, and the nurse is not going to administer that to you because it's federally illegal, and we're a federally funded school. So he had to drive off campus, take his medicine, then drive back on campus, and he did that throughout his whole senior year.
He graduated.
But he graduated.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And is he still doing it, do you know?
He does it occasionally. He doesn't need it as much, but he does on occasion because he still plays. He still
Plays hockey.
He's
back to hockey?
He still plays. He still plays, and when he does, he gets a little bit banged up, then he needs it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me another story. It's so interesting because they're so diverse, these stories.
So I have a 12-year-old. He came in for ADD. Okay, so
Does every 12-year-old in America claim ADD right now? Let's just talk about that, okay?
But he couldn't sit through a class. He couldn't sit through a class. I mean, in meeting him, I would describe his brain like a Ferrari, but he had bicycle pedals for brakes. He just couldn't settle down, and he would always get in trouble. And so his mom brought him in after a course of Ritalin, and they gave him something else. He gained about 20 pounds as a 12-year-old, and he'd lost his personality. So his mom was really worried, did some research. Another mom said, hey, you know, I heard about CBD. It could help for ADD. And he had a little bit of Tourette's, so he had like a motor tic. And so she brought him in, and we put him on a CBD oil, a very low-dose CBD oil. And this time we didn't tell the school. We didn't tell the school because we wanted to see if it would work. Mm-hmm. But he went to private school, so it actually worked out. So after it worked, it took about a month to finally dial in the dosage. So after about a month, and we got the right dosage for him, and he was able to sit through 3 classes. And his teacher called the mom and said, are you doing different occupational therapy? Are you seeing a different psychotherapist? Because something is different. Something's different. And then we had a meeting with the school nurse, and we said, this is what we're doing. If you could administer it, and the nurse agreed. And referred a few more kids to me.
Tell me one where maybe it hasn't worked so well.
I have an MS patient, and she's newly diagnosed, and she was basically having muscle spasms. She had some facial drooping, but she also had fibromyalgia. And fibromyalgia
What is that?
It's this low-lying chronic pain, and it affects all joints of your body.
Oh.
This is what my mother is.
Oh, really?
You have brain fog. It's almost like So you have 2 parts of your nervous system. You have the sympathetic part of your nervous system, which is like a fight or flight response. You're running from the bear, your adrenaline, you're getting to the next meeting. Then you have this parasympathetic part of your nervous system, which is relaxation and digestion and sex and eating. So when you have fibromyalgia, the sympathetic part of your nervous system is just revving all the time, and your body can't balance it back. And you have pain all over. And the reason why you have brain fog is because your body can only prioritize so many things at once. If your pain receptors are just firing and firing all the time, your brain will shut down because it needs to survive. You need to do the basic things to get through the day. And she's been trying different ratios, THC, CBD, 1-to-1 ratio, where it's balanced so she doesn't have the psychoactive effects. Because she works. She can't take THC during the day. Then she tried a high CBD dose, and it didn't work. And what finally worked is the high THC, but she can't take it during the day because she needs to function. She's an administrator, she has meetings, so that psychoactive feeling is something that makes her very, very uncomfortable. So she kind of hangs in there till the end of the day. But I do have her on a low dose CBD just to see if we can get that inflammation down. And we're about 60 days in, so we're going to reassess. Yeah.
So I would love to hear some follow-up after that, after a while on that, because it is something that personally relates. My mother's has fibromyalgia, and I've been talking with her about getting into CBD and checking it out as a potential way to treat that. So I would love to stay in touch and hear more about that.
Sure.
One interesting thing I've been reading about is with opioids, because everybody in America seems to have an opioid addiction, and that cannabis or CBD, I'm not sure which, can help. Actually, it works with it increases the power of the pain relief, but decreases the dependence on the opioid. Have you noticed this? Have you been reading about this?
Yeah, so patients that actually take it together, it's actually synergistic. So they'll cut their opiate doses in half or cut the frequency of it. And I find that all across the board. At least 80% of my patients from the very beginning.
You told me an interesting metaphor about how cannabis works as a scale. Would you tell us how this thing seems to work in balance and what effect it has on balancing the human systems, the body?
Well, because it's the largest receptor system and it works on so many levels for different neurotransmitters, it's like that. I was just telling you about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic scale of the nervous system. CBD naturally increases GABA receptors in the brain, GABA influx. And what GABA is, it tells your body, let's power down. It's safe, it's okay. And so that balance, that scale, it brings down that fight or flight response, that sympathetic response, and brings up the parasympathetics. And it does that naturally. When you look at Xanax or other benzodiazepines, it does that too, but it does it in a synthetic way so that you need it every single time when it runs out. But with the CBD, it tells your body, let's create more GABA receptors. I want an influx of GABA receptors. We need you to work. And it basically coaxes the body to bring itself back into balance, which is different than pharmaceutical medication.
Pretty amazing. Yeah, that's a pretty amazing plant, don't you think? By the way, if any of you have any questions, I'll ask them, but write them down for me and pass them up if you can. Okay?
Well, we have a microphone.
Oh, we have a
too.
mic. We have a microphone. So we can pass it
recording.
around.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
please.
I
You have a
think,
question?
Alan, do you have a question?
Alan?
There's actually 2 questions from the Facebook live stream.
Oh, wow.
Great.
Cool.
Yes. The first is, where can I get the book?
Amazon.com. You see that?
Well, they can buy it straight from the website.
Or you can buy it on bravenewweed.com. Thank you for that.
bravenewweed.com.
Thank you for that shameless self-promotion again.
Or right here at the
right here at the
Kitchen.
Alchemist Kitchen. Exactly.
If you want a copy of
you're
the
here
book tonight, they do have them out. You can get your own copy.
And other question, awesome chat. What is a good way to take CBD? Is vaping okay? I see many places selling CBD. Is there a way to ensure high-quality products such as certification and verification board? Thanks.
I was going to ask a very similar thing about delivery. Is there an ideal delivery system? Is the tincture the way to go? I know they like here you can get a topical rub.
Well, it depends on what you're trying to treat.
Right.
If it's insomnia and you wake up at 2 a.m., but you're able to fall asleep, then you would want a tincture or an oral tablet because it's going to give you that extended release. But if you have a hard time falling asleep and you need to power down right away, you're going to use a vape because it's going to work within, I'd say 30 seconds. Yeah, but it's not as long lasting. So that's when you have to decide, do you need something that'll give you, more mileage or do you need something like now?
But you could mix them. Too.
Why not
And then
both?
you can mix
You
them.
can mix them.
Yes, absolutely. And I do have patients that mix them. And what's the greatest thing about CBD, because it's safe, you can play with it on your own and you can figure out, like, you know what, I found my sweet spot. I do need, a little bit as soon as I wake up in the morning, and by the time I get out of the shower and head to work, I'm good. By the time I'm at work, I have a clear head and I'm focused and I have decreased pain. So you'll be able to play with that.
Amazing. Do we have an
Who else
audience
had a question? Bart.
Thank you. So when you talk about this system, it's the largest receptor system in the body. I'm guessing it's what they call the endocannabinoid system.
Correct.
Is there a way that you would describe that to someone, in terms of kind of giving a way to visualize it? What does a big receptor system look like in the body? Is it something more comparable to the nervous system, the lymph system? Is it something that lives in the cells? Like, what is this big receptor system?
Well, actually, Joe illustrated it really well in his book when he said it's like a supercomputer. Remember saying that in your book?
I
You
do.
said it's
Yes,
like
I
a
remember. I do remember
I've read
writing
his
that.
book
Yes.
many times. Okay, it's like a supercomputer, and Dr. Meshulam in Israel says it's parallel to the immune system. So think about how vast that is.
I think of it as a universe or a galaxy with the Milky Way in the brain as the center, right? Because the brain is the densest concentration of receptors, but it's on the membrane of many cells throughout the body, including the connective tissue, which is where inflammation happens. So it's deeply embedded into all the cells. That's why it treats so many different things, because it works differently in those different organs also. It's very confusing.
Well, and in a very crude way, it's like a plug on a cell, right? Like you have a receiver plug, and then whatever amino acid,
A lock and
or
key,
whatever
they
might
call
be.
it.
Yeah,
They call it a lock and key.
Locks into that receptor on that cell, and then transfers
Information.
on a molecular level. So in that endocannabinoid system, you have your THC opening up those cells, and then if that CBD molecule gets in there, it's able to do its work.
CBD binds first. That's
Yeah.
why CBD blunts THC. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times, I know from like the Charlotte's Web strain, there's a very, very, very small amount of THC, which sort of wakes those receptors up, and then the CBD just beats it to the punch. So that's how you get a much
That's a good
stronger
analogy.
That's a good
quick
point,
delivery.
I like that.
Yeah. In the states that it is legal, are there doctors, physicians that you can send people to get treated with CBD?
In the states that it's illegal?
No, that it's legal.
Oh, that it's legal.
Yeah, so is it like a normal thing? Say I have somebody who lives in a state where it's legal, they need to be treated with something. I can just search for a doctor.
You live in a state
Well,
where
yeah.
it's legal.
Isn't
You live in
CBD
New York.
CBD is legal in all
Oh.
50 states.
Oh, so it's.
CBD
Yeah,
weirdly.
CBD you can get.
I
Yeah.
wasn't sure because hemp isn't legal, right? Because isn't it?
It is.
It is?
Now it's legal.
Okay,
Yeah.
'cause I know for years they tried.
It's very
using it
confusing.
for-
It's so confusing.
Yeah. So then you can get treated with CBD anywhere then.
Pretty much.
Okay.
No, you can
Well, and
get
find,
CBD.
You can find a lot of it over the counter.
Okay.
You
So,
can-
for instance, the
I asked 'cause
Charlotte's
my
Web.
daughter, she's 14, she has ADD, and they want to give her, medicine.
You're in New York.
She lives in Seattle.
Easy.
Seattle, it's legal.
That's
Seattle's
right.
legal.
That's right. That's why I was asking.
That's right.
Seattle's everything's legal.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I can hook you up.
I'd rather. Okay.
We can
great.
hook you up.
Perfect. Because she's starting high school.
Okay.
Yep.
Good evening. So my question is, do you have any experience with treating someone with severe autism that may have the insomnia, the hyperactivity, the just aggression with the product?
So in my California office, more than half of my practice was special needs children, and I have severe autistic children that are banging their head across the window, punching glass plate windows, or really self-injurious behavior, punching mom, biting mom, and I do have experience treating that, and I will treat not only with CBD but THC or THCA.
And how's the effectiveness? Like, how
It's-
would you say?
It doesn't work for everyone. It's just like with anything, it's not a silver bullet. But I do get a lot of success. But I have to integrate other things like diet, getting the electronics out because electronics it stimulates dopamine.
Electronics.
And electronics.
What do you mean? Cell phones?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times when you're part of an autistic family, you can play with the iPad or you're playing with the iPhone, and you're constantly, you want it, and that's a dopamine push, and you have to cut that back along with the cannabis and diet, and I find that those three things work much better together.
Interesting.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot
Harvard
about
did a study on that actually.
It's the
I'll
blue,
show you
the blue screen.
Yeah, I'll show you the reference. But Harvard did a study
A
about
lot
the
of
dopamine.
interesting stuff out
So
there.
it's
about staring
making
at
us
digital
anxious
screens.
if you didn't know that before, kids.
Exactly. And the kids don't know how to deal with it. Right? For us, we can kind of
Maybe
put it away.
Maybe turn it off.
But
Well, it's-
as a child, you can't take it away.
Notification anxiety. You know about this, right?
I have it.
What?
I have
Notification anxiety, where you just keep checking your phone for a little red one to pop up that you got a notification.
Or you check it because you
Phantom
don't, or because you don't have
vibrations.
any, which is another
Phantom vibration,
problem.
where you just like think your phone buzzes. And pull it
I've
out
never
to
heard
You know
check.
how I handle that at dinner? I will have everyone at the dinner table put their phone in the center, and whoever picks it up first is paying.
Pays the bill.
That's a great.
Put a napkin over it, right?
Now that is a good idea. That's the,
Oh,
Sir.
yeah.
I had a two-part question. One, I was curious about anxiety in children, whether that's something that you've used it for. And two, it's hard for me to hear this vast range of things that it can be good for without sort of having that sense of, is this a snake oil thing, a little bit?
Absolutely.
Because it seems almost impossible that one substance could be that broad. If you could speak to that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Absolutely. And that's what I thought from the very beginning as well. I thought, how can this one thing work for everything? I mean, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm a cynic. Of course, what are you trying to sell me? What are you going to try to pull over my head? But the thing about cannabis is you only need a very little, and you'll see a difference pretty quickly because you're deficient in the endocannabinoid system. And that's what a lot of scientists and researchers have found, that there's an endocannabinoid deficiency, because we all produce our own cannabinoids. And that's the thing. We all produce our own cannabinoids, but in some of these ailments, anxiety, stress, Alzheimer's, cancer, Parkinson's, there's a deficiency. in the endocannabinoid system. And so the CBD helps fill that void, and it helps balance out the nervous system. Because think about what everything stems from. Anxiety, if you think about heart disease, if you think about rheumatoid arthritis, all of this stems from inflammation. That's the source. And that's why I've seen it work. I mean, for me, the volume of anecdotal data that I've had over I made a career out of it, is huge. And that's my meter for success, is how many lives I've changed. Has the seizures decreased? Is the kid going back to school? Is he not punching mom in the face? Can he have can he have dinner at the table without everyone walking on eggshells? That's how I measure it.
I think that's a great place to end, because I think you're a hero.
Well, can you
in
touch
doing
real
that
quick
kind
on
of
the
work?
on the first part of his question? He asked about anxiety in young
We have
children.
more questions. We're not ending there. so much for that ending. Okay, screw that ending. Cancel.
It is very good, but
we'll do another
the
one.
first half of
We'll
his
do it
question
again.
about
Don't worry.
anxiety in children.
Anxiety, so we have this little part of our brain called the amygdala, and it's almond-shaped. It's at the bottom of our brain stem, and the metaphor is lizard brain, okay? So the lizard brain is always anxious and fearful, and that's what's helped us run from predators. But now there are no predators, right? But we still have that amygdala can be triggered by any little thing. Mom and dad walking out the room, an assignment, I have to do public speaking, right? You fear for your life. But that amygdala is covered in CB receptors. So what the CBD does is it basically calms the amygdala down. It tells your body you can relax, you can forget, which is why it's good with PTSD, which is why it's good with anxiety and stress. So there's physiological responses, and that can be measured, and that's cited in the 20,000 plus medical journals that you can find on PubMed. Yeah, you could just go on PubMed, and if you just put in a search, you'll see everything comes out, and it's free.
Go ahead.
This is a good segue for my next question. I recently learned about a endocannabinoid gene panel that can be, you can buy it for $97, and they can actually look and read where you are deficient in your cannabinoid receptors, so that the titrating of what you want to work in your medicine, high, low, medium, and what, all of that. There's an organization that has actually broken down the different flavonoids, terpenes, all of that.
Are you talking about Cortigen, Medical Genomics?
No.
Or the one in Phylos in Oregon? So there are companies that are coming out
it's
with
called
genomic
Good
sequencing.
Earth. It's more of a non-medical
Okay.
organization. And I was listening to the Sacred Plant, that series that's been going on this past 2017, and that's how I originally got into all this, and then connected with Dr. Chin. But there was a man, and I don't have his name, but I can email you the information. And he actually does this, and you can set up private consults with him to go through, and then that's given to the doctor that you're working with, so that they can titrate and know exactly where you're deficient and where you are not deficient.
You buying that?
Well, we can tell our genes. I mean, we can tell our ancestry through.
Well, genomic sequencing is the future. I mean, that is really where we're going to figure out, what to do with cancer, which is a strong genomic disease. And there are companies that are trying to sequence the cannabis strains, and we're sequencing cancer genes, and we're sequencing our own genes. And in Israel, they're looking at cancer cell lines and how they are affected by the different strains. I don't think the technology is quite there yet. I've met with some of the companies, the biotech companies, that are looking into that, but I think it's definitely something in the near future.
Great. Anybody else? Going, gone. Okay, June, thank you very, very, very much for your time tonight. And for the final plug, I want to invite you guys to listen in a couple of weeks, where we are going to talk about ganja yoga in great depth.
That's right. That's the next episode. You were out in California.
I was out in California. I did ganja yoga. It was really great. I really recommend it. And the person who runs it is also a sex therapist. and she does ganja sex therapy, which is very interesting also on a whole different level, which you'll have to you're going to have to listen to the podcast to find out more, okay? So thank you all for coming and participating. I really appreciate it.
Before we wrap up, we would be remiss if we didn't do a little bit of business on this. So if you guys enjoyed this, please let the Alchemist Kitchen know, and a big hand for them for letting us come in and do this live here. If you've enjoyed the show and if you've enjoyed the program that we put on, we do this every 2 weeks. A new episode of the Brave New Weed podcast does come out. You can find the podcast online at bravenewweed.com. And also, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. We're regularly sharing news and information that we find interesting in the world of cannabis. And lastly, we are supported by wonderful people like you who come to these events and who would listen to the podcast. So we do have a Patreon account. If you go to patreon.com/bravenewweed, you can donate to the show, to continue the show at any level. We open up rewards starting at $1. So even $1 a month is enough to keep us going, to produce the show, everything like that.
She's a patron right there. She's a patron.
So if you guys are enjoying what Brave New Weed is up to and you want us to keep on going, we encourage you to check all those places out. And thank you again for joining us.
That's it. Thank you.